and he certainly felt he had some of the qualities and the spirit to do it. And he also needed equally minded people with various skill sets and competencies to assist him to do it. So he assembled, to the best of his ability, as I came to find out, a certain number of people who were in the PNDC government. I was then in the United States, and so I didn't have the opportunity to serve in that of government. But when the democratic transition took place, and then he had an opportunity to form a new set of people as a government, he obviously had to look around for people who not only could serve competently, but would at least pass the initial litmus test of parliamentary approval, because in the past he didn't need parliamentary approval for the people he was appointing. So I'm sure he then began a lot more consciously to look for people that he thought would meet the various tests that the parliament was likely to face, and also who could serve with the kind of competencies that Ghana deserved. So even though I was working outside the country, he reached out to me and asked if I could serve, and that's how we began to work together.
Okay. But then now looking at the job you did, and looking at the man whose casket is before us, I know that he had a set desire to see Ghana move on. Whilst working with him, did he give the indication that he was satisfied with the type of people that he was working with and what results he was getting? Did he give that?
Well, no, he gave many indications of some degrees of satisfaction, but considerable concern about inadequate performance and also inadequate satisfaction on at least a number of fronts, including the issue of corruption. I had the opportunity to ask him once, how much time does he think a government or a president should spend on fighting corruption? And he said 70%. He said if any president that does not wish to devote about 70% of his time to fighting corruption, he can't fight the corruption. So that was his view. And of course, he reached that view after many years in office. And part of the way in which he fought corruption was to delegate what he would consider normal administrative functions to his deputy, that is Vice President Mills. That's when I began to serve in the government. I'm not sure how the presidency worked under his previous Vice President, that's Akar, but by the time I became a minister, worked in two portfolios under him, both as Minister of Communication and then as Education. All cabinet meetings were chaired by Vice President Mills. That meant to me that he had delegated as much of the administrative day-to-day requirements of governance to his Vice President. He had to have confidence in the President in order to hand over so much authority to him. But beyond that, anytime I thought there was a matter that required his personal attention, and I'd call him to suggest something or the other, he would refer me back to the Vice President. So quite clearly, he was not willing to take on certain kinds of tasks that would diminish his ability to fight the corruption that he thought was the biggest challenge that Ghana was facing. So he also confided in me at a certain point when he asked me to come and work with him in the Osu Castle. When I was ambassador to the United States, he withdrew me from the United States about 4 months into the 1996 election, when he thought things were not going that well for his own election situation, to come and do some work with him. So he installed me in an office in the Osu Castle, and at that time I had almost day-to-day contact and consultations with him because of the nature of the assignments he gave to me, which were very varied. It included, certain work of the Central Bank, where he thought, because I was working for the African Development Bank before, and also for the World Bank before, so even though most people have not understood me as a banker, he seemed to realize that the experience that I had allowed me to suggest and advise on certain aspects of things that were not going that well within the central banking system. But he also involved me in a number of other, confidential aspects of some supervisory work of some ministers and ministerial activities. So eventually he asked me and two other people, one of whom actually is deceased, Professor Akufo-addo, so I can mention his name, and the other gentleman who was a previous ambassador, to constitute ourselves into a 3-person committee to review the entire workings of the presidency at the time when Mr. P.B. Obeng had unfortunately been handed over to the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice for investigation. Unfortunately, he's died, of course, and there was a certain gap. He noticed a certain gap in the administration of the presidency. So he asked me to get involved in some aspects of the work of the presidency, and in particular to work with two other people, including Professor Kofi-Awono, who he made chairman of this committee, to look at the inner workings of the presidency and to make some very specific recommendations to him. He requested every single person in his administration, every single member of the government, to report to this committee for consultations and for discussions. And actually we met everybody but one of the people in the administration and made an 88-page report available to him. When he received the report, he sat up and said, if I can even just do 1/3 of the things that you guys have recommended here, government and Ghana would be a very different place. So I can't speak to what were the constraints why he might not have been able to implement the recommendations of this high-level committee that he himself had constituted. But I imagine that he eventually tried to implement part of it. I know that because when he subsequently chose President, then Professor Atta Mills, to be his running mate and vice president, and when President Rawlings and Mills were elected in the 1996 election, I asked him, I was then brought to become Minister of Communication. I asked him whether that report, which we had written, could be shared with Professor Atta Mills, then Vice President. And he gladly said yes, we should share a copy with him, because he was then more or less the one that could implement the recommendations that were made. Unfortunately, because of the responsibility that I had as Communication Minister and then as Minister for Education, and of course in between also as Minister responsible for Mines and Energy, I never really took up the subject matter of that report with either Mills or President Rawlings. But I'm simply addressing the issue of his capacity to delegate and to allow others to play their roles, so he could concentrate on the matter of greatest concern to him, which was corruption in Ghana, integrity, probity, accountability, transparency, the very values that he espoused, which many of us hope the current and future governments of Ghana, because the values are eternal values. Sure. They were not limited to his administration or a particular era in Ghana's history. He was suggesting, by living out those principles himself, that for as long as Ghana existed, he hoped that men and women who came into governance, it's not compulsory, those who want to stay in private sector, who want to do something else can do that. But he felt that those who want to be political leaders had to literally swear an oath to abide by the principles of integrity, accountability, probity, transparency, and social justice.
Dr. Gospel Gabriel, looking at the life of former President Rawlings, you realize that he had a lot he had a bigger greater desire of making sure that this country would move on. That is all about his sacrifices he made. And if you look at him, and looking at him lying down there in the casket, can you say that it was a job well achieved?
Well, very few people achieve all that they would like to accomplish in any lifetime. So I'm sure that he achieved even much more than he probably expected to achieve when he joined the Air Force. So going by that rubric or that standard, you'd ask yourself what happened to almost all his colleagues who were Air Force officers. I don't think any or most of them ever rose in the ranks of the Air Force to become Air Force commanders, or in this case, even Chief of Defense Staff or the Armed Forces, Commander-in-Chief. So in that respect, he did, I would say, exceed what may have been even his own expectations. But having then got into the presidency, whether he achieved all that he could and would have liked to, it's where there will always be an eternal debate as to the cup is either half full or half empty. Quite clearly, he chose the very best people, as far as I could see, and those who are willing to serve in his government. So if you go back to the early PNDC days, he even selected people like John Agyapong to be a member of his government. He chose people like General Mensah to become a member of his government. The fact that some stayed and some left, they would be the best to answer as to why they didn't stay. When the opportunity came to my turn, well, he realized that I was working for a very highly paid international organization, and he was literally extracting me out of a long-term career to work in the government. He didn't know how much I was being paid, but that was not even a matter of debate. But he advised me that there's no money in this assignment I'm going to give you. It's a matter of national service. So basically, without discussing terms and conditions of service, he basically wanted to know whether I'm willing to serve the nation. And so that has been my mindset. Of course, to the detriment of my family and other members who have known the consequences of that decision. But he basically gave his life to Ghana, and he was looking for people who were also willing to give their lives to Ghana. So it will obviously have been a matter of some disappointment in the process, especially for the last 20 years. Once he left office and he couldn't really control much of what happened, to have noted that many of the people, not all, many of the people who subsequently succeeded him in various positions, they don't have the same concern, the same focus, the same even awareness, and certainly the same sense of self-sacrifice as he had, that he would have known certainly before his death.
That he would have known certainly before his death. But now we are celebrating a life well lived. At 73, I think it is celebrating, and that is what we are all celebrating today. And if I heard you right, the values that he really, probity, accountability, social justice, these are core values that are supposed to direct every development of every community and every society. And he started talking about this. And even when he left office, he kept talking about it. And so it looks as if before even his death, these were words that he kept using. And he wanted to make sure that this country would move on. But now you yourself, as someone who really was a lieutenant with him, a commandant with him, he had full trust in you, and you did work with him, and you achieved, you worked on a line to achieve the results you want. Right. If you want to wish him well, how would you wish him? Would you want to say that, General, boss, you are successful. You don't have to feel any trouble. You are successful, and I think you have to rest in peace.
I'm sure we all wish him a very, very peaceful rest. I think when I started, at some point in this conversation, I've tried to suggest that based on where he started as an army officer and where he ended as a head of state, he should, and his family should take some pride in how far he went in his life. He was the first to acknowledge, even to his cabinet colleagues and ministers, that he did not have the same opportunity or the same academic training as some of us had received, and that's why he expected so much more from us. I mean, the cabinets that I came and worked with had lots of people with various PhDs and master's degrees and high-level qualifications. And so he felt that if you want to acquire these degrees, he was a pilot. He was as good a pilot as I think Ghana has ever trained. He also felt that we also should have to be the best in our respective fields, whether we're engineers, whether we're lawyers, whether we're, accountants. And so, to the extent that he had selected us based on our competencies, and he expected us to deliver on that basis, he would have been disappointed, obviously, because, as I said, not everyone came with the same spirit. It's not just what you have on your certificates that tells, as Shakespeare said, there's no art to find the mind's composition in the face. So you can't really tell everything that is a person's spirit. He was dealing with people's spirits. He was a spiritual person in that sense, and obviously he would have loved to attract people of kindred spirit, kindred mind. He did attract very good people, but not all were as focused in the areas of his concern about corruption, about social justice, about transparency as he was. So he had a much higher expectation of himself and of his government than I think many of the officials that served with him. And since he left office,
he is a people's man.
Absolutely.
People love. And now that he's gone, what would you tell?
Not just in Ghana, most of Africa.
Now that he is not there, he is gone. What would you want to tell the good people of this country and the good people of Africa and the rest of the world? What do you want to tell them? How should it take place? Should it be the end of probity, accountability, and social justice? Or his words, the values he stood for, should still continue?
Well, one of the concerns I had, which I expressed to him when he was leaving office, or when we all were leaving office about the year 2000, we lost that election, was his legacy. And so we had several conversations with him and some members of his family about his legacy. And I had actually hoped that he would set up what I had called the Rawlings Center on Development and Democracy, because those were the words that I couched in his honor when I requested the Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, United States, which is Kwame Nkrumah's old university, to confer on Rawlings the doctorate degree. I'm sure that was the first of the doctorate degrees that he may have been awarded. And I selected the words. I had a conversation with the Vice Chancellor of the university, the President of the university, as Americans call Niara Sudakasa. And she asked me what kind of degrees would be most suitable and acceptable. And I suggested that development and democracy, which reflected what I thought Rawlings had achieved in Ghana in the area of development, taking power, electricity, all the way to the north, making sure roads were constructed left and right, carrying cocoa beans on his own shoulders, etc., was the development part. And then eventually, when he became he got involved as ECOWAS chairman and maybe African Union chairman, etc. He became very interested in peace and tranquility in the West African region. So in terms of Liberia and Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, peace and tranquility, Upper Volta, after with the death of his friend Thomas Sankara and so forth. So I thought that aspect also should be captured in whatever we retained as a memorial for him. So talking about memorials, we are talking about, of course, he himself wanted his name to be carved in the hearts and minds of Ghanaians. So when there were attempts actually by the military, to name military vessels and armored vehicles and all kinds of things, or even the streets of Ghana, there's no Rawlings Avenue, there's no Rawlings Highway or whatever. He said he's not what he's looking for. He's looking for monuments, statues, etc. in his name. So he himself recommended that we should remember him in our hearts. And if all of us can remember him positively in our hearts, then at least he would have achieved one of the objectives that I think he set himself. But the other monuments that we need to set is, I hope the government can consider the Rawlings Center, the Rawlings Institute, as I recommended at the time, and constitute a group of people that can consider the best ways to honor him. Because, for example, he could have named the University for Development Studies after himself. He gave $50,000 that had been personally awarded from the World Food Prize or whatever it was for the benefit of that university. So that money, if he had kept it in a bank, could have grown to $500,000 today. But in the latter years, he used to complain both privately and publicly about, the financial situations that, even as a former president, he found himself in. He had approved a very, very modest pension for himself. If I remember correctly, the Green Street report had recommended maybe one vehicle, 1 or 2 trips overseas every year. Just very, very, one house, very meager resources for a retired president, and he had approved it. It was during the era of President Akufo, when Akufo also was leaving office, when there was an attempt to, explode that amount and offer $1 million, $2 million, etc. Rawlings refused it, and I think that also forced Akufo to refuse it also, because he just didn't see that was what a retired president of a poor country like Ghana should be earning. So he set a high moral standard for all of us, and all those who intend and wish and struggle to go into public office should, I think, go with those things in mind. I had to struggle a lot to contain those values and to uphold them myself throughout the period that I served in governance, and it's a struggle to, just like being a good Christian, it's a struggle to maintain those high values and those principles. But there are struggles worth maintaining. Because at the end of it all, as we see him lying here, he can't go with any houses, he can't go with any certificates, he can't go with any planes, even shoes, except maybe what he may be buried in. So at the end of the day, it's very simple for all of us to see that the end is silence, as Shakespeare said.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akufo-Addo. It's a pleasure having you in the studio, and I wish you a healthy day, and then we wish you good luck in the years ahead.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so I have been talking to Dr. Akufo-Addo, who was the former Minister of Communication and Later Education with former President Jerry John Rawlings, whose casket is in front of us, is before us at the Accra International Conference Center, waiting burial on Wednesday, the 27th day of January 2021. Yes, I will. Welcome back to the Accra International Conference Center, the lying in state of the former president of the Republic of Ghana, Flight Lieutenant General John Rawlings. Now, Captain Akaku, I see that I think the Katafa guards are now filing past the dead, the casket. And does it mean that they have finished with it, or what is happening? Why are they doing it now?
Okay, thank you, Gabby. I think as we are getting close to the final part of today's program, I think it is good they also pay their last respect to our former head of state before the day comes to an end. So as you can see, that is what they are doing. Most of them have had their turn changing their colleagues when the period came for them to change over. So I'm sure it's right that they pay their last respect before the day ends, and then they will take it out from there.
Right. So, but then if you look at in all, we are looking at a picture of about how many officers. We're looking at a picture of about how many officers, because they had been running shift of 4. Right. So we're looking at a picture of about 3, 4, 5, 20, maybe 10 rounds.
I think they are like 60 senior officers. Making up the catafalque guards. Yeah, so you see them 4 as they came to change. I think they are in the same squad, taking into consideration their formation and then the protocols laid down for COVID. So you see they didn't come in their numbers as they are, but they came as in 4 just to uphold those protocols. Yeah.
So I think we still see some military officers also coming to file past the casket.
Yes.
As the day is drawing closer, so it means that we are likely to end the day, and the officers and men of the Ghana Armed Forces who are present at the Accra International Conference Center also taking their turn to file past the mortal remains of the former president, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings.
As we've seen our military colleagues file past to pay their last respect, I think we would also get the opportunity to go and pay our last respect to our former head of state and our former commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces. So
yes. So I think that's about right. And so then I think Captain Edward Sananu Akapo and then Lieutenant Judy Nuna Te. You have the permission. You have the right to go and file past. You have the right to go and file past. The mortal remains.
Sure.
Yes, we'll meet again when immediately you finish with that.
Yes.
We are watching the TV, so we are seeing you. So immediately you finish, then it means that it is straight into the commentary room.
Yes, so once we are done, we'll get back to the studio and then we'll take it out from there. Thank you very much, Gabby.
passed. And now the two military officers in the group that just passed here are Captain Edward Sananu Akakpo and Lieutenant Judy Nunate. With me in the commentary room, and they left and they went to file past the body. They just finished filing past the body. They have also finished paying their last respect to the former president and the commander-in-chief, the former commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces. Yes, that is Captain Akakpo and Lieutenant Sananu, Lieutenant T on your screens now. last leg of day 2, that is Monday, 25th January 2021. That is the laying in state at the Accra International Conference Center of the former President of the Republic of Ghana, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, the people's man. That's a man that really pulled the crowd. He's the man that really drove the people and attracted every attention. Today, he is in his casket, lying in state at the Accra International Conference Center, where we started from the morning, heads of security agencies, leaders of political parties, staff of the office of the former president, and then some traditional religious leaders and members of the general public have filed past the body. I have with me, in commentary position, Honorable Abla Jifa Gomashi, who was a former Deputy Minister of Tourism, and now Tourism and Culture, and now Tourism, Culture and Creative Art, and now the Member of Parliament for K2 South. So, Honorable, you are welcome to commentary position.
You addressing me as Honorable when I'm your younger sister. So this blessing I receive. Thank you.
And this is extremely how life looks like. It comes, and when it comes as a blessing, God has given to you, and you need to hold it. And I know some of you have the heart of holding and working with people, and so the people will benefit from you. And that is exactly the man who is lying before us today. He pulls the crowd. And I know, being a minister, Deputy Minister for Tourism, Culture and Creative Arts. And that is a profession that you really love. And the man lying there, I know, has the values and tenets and creates traits that you really respect. I know it is difficult for you to answer, but if I should ask you, how are you feeling?
Mixed feelings, really. Mixed feelings. To choose your words, you said the people's man. It would have been my wish that we were in an era where crowds could gather so we can celebrate him. He's the founder of the party I belong to.
Sure.
But beyond that is also a mentor for many people my generation. I recall 1979. I mean, I was young, but I recall it very vividly. When Ibrahim Hollison of blessed memory, who used to read news at GBC, lived near our home in Medina when the coup happened, and he running to us for protection at a point because of some shenanigans at the broadcasting house. And also the students in Medina at the time were like the heartbeat of the revolution. I recall very vividly Erika Kumia, Divine Petigo, these seniors, my big brother Dola Gomashim, and many others who were chanting and singing the songs of the revolution. The man who led that revolution, I think, set the pace for some of us of speaking fearlessly and boldly, of speaking against what's wrong in our society. We were taught to be respectful, so we did it respectfully. And then I was blessed to have my late maternal uncle be his first secretary for trade, Kofi Ashibwe-Mensah of blessed memory too. And then I was a volunteer with the young cadres under Kofi Potofi, Kofi Addo, and Commodore Steve Obimpe during NADMO days. And then Talents Theatre Company, which came out of that whole exercise. And his dedication to our culture and our heritage is what endeared him to me even more. Before him was the Art Center in Accra and Art Center in Kumasi. He brought the Centers for National Culture in the 10 regions that we had. And then subsequently the National Commission on Culture, which birthed also the National Theatre, and I was a beneficiary of the first batch of people who were employed there. So my whole life has had something to say about the fact that there was once upon a time a Jerry Rawlings who walked the earth. I was blessed also to work with Mrs. Rawlings, producing by the Far Side, which was a product of the 31st December Women's Revolution, movement. Excuse me, the 31st December Women's Movement. And I'm a member of that organization. I served there, and so I've come to close contact with this family for many reasons and for many years. I think that I discovered my love for working with children through the opportunity that Mrs. Rawlings gave me. And so there's joy, there's sadness, there's gratitude, there's awe, there's fear of God. And I've learned to number my days. I've learned to number my days because only last year, or the year before, I think it must have been 2019, that I went to him to tell him that I was going to contest and I needed his blessing. And he teased Dr. Jokoto and Dr. Agumenu that the three of us are going to contest. He's waiting for us to bring the trophy home. Somehow, I'm the only person among the three of us that day who won. So I went back to tell him, and he teased my brothers that, you see, this is why I support women. 3 of you won, 2 of you men lost, and she won. And we laughed about it, as you have just chuckled right now. Unfortunately, my own husband passed away shortly after. And I went to tell him that this is my lot, that I had lost my husband. I went with my stepchildren and my son. And he was sorry for me. He felt sorry for me and assured me that he would come to the funeral. And he did come. And today I'm here to watch him lying there lifeless too. It reminds us that we have numbered days.
Sure.
It reminds us that if you live right by the people that God gives you, it reminds us that if you live to serve God, you can't be celebrated. And even though you may die and leave, you can still live. So his mortal remains is lying in front of us. But will we ever forget to mention Jerry Rawlings? Never. As with Kwame Nkrumah, so will it be with Jerry Rawlings. I wish that my party had a bigger role to play in all of this, because like it or not, he was a founder of this party. Like it or not, like my father, who is 95 years old, still does. He corrects us because he loves us. So, as his children, I feel that there's so much more we could have done, but perhaps it is also an opportunity for us to have a reflection of how things just don't happen because you wish it. Sometimes I think God uses all kinds of situations and opportunities to teach us, to remind us that he's still in charge. And so in whatever space we all find ourselves in, as a party, as individuals, as compatriots, may we be inspired by the good things that His Excellency President Jerry John Rawlings did for this country. Nobody can take that away from him. I'm happy that in his own lifetime he was able to apologize for the excesses of the revolution. I'm happy for him that he was able to right some wrongs. I wish he had lived long enough to, again, have the opportunity to right some wrongs that still persist amongst us. But perhaps he's given us the baton, and it is our duty now as his children to see how far we too can go and hand over that baton to the next generation.
That's right. So, honorable member of parliament, if you look at the man lying, the man whose mortal remains is before us, he stood for certain creditable values: probity, accountability, social justice. Are we saying that we can still, as a people, because I don't think that from the way he speaks about it, he doesn't tell us, he's not telling us that these are only values for NDC. He said these are national values. These are values that as a country and as a people we should embrace and walk along with. Can you suggest that it is possible that these values would leave the small confines of the political party NDC and be a respected value with national character?
Absolutely. As I said before, that as members of the NDC, as his children, as compatriots, remember I said that? Yeah. It is our responsibility to nurture and make sure we don't let it die with him. The NDC is the biggest political party in Ghana. No two ways about it, no doubt about it. So if we make a conscious effort to live by these principles, I'm sure it will affect the whole of the population. So I'm charging my fellow Akatamansonians that perhaps it is for good that we are where we are today. Perhaps it is a call to action. Perhaps if we interpret that this may be happening so that we can rise like the phoenix out of the embers, we can make it right. We can make it work for our country. But as you said, it should not be left to the NDC. I think that it should be a national agenda. History doesn't assure us of that happening, but we can change. Look, if you all read Kwame Nkrumah's memoirs, the policies, the direction which he was taking this country, he was opposed many times, wasn't he? He's gone. Mm-hmm. But on hindsight, we do know that he set out to do right by us. And we have not embraced that fully. We've been doing it piecemeal. Some with all the other presidents who have come. Perhaps it's about time that we take a second look at where we want to go to and how we get there. It will not be easy, as that song by Osibisa aptly puts it. Heavens knows how we will get there. But we cannot also throw our hands in despair. We must consciously, each one of us, take steps to see which part of it can I handle and how does that affect the whole. If we have that introspection, I'm sure that this country will be the better for us. Yes.
Thank you so much, Honorable Member of Parliament. It is a pleasure having you in the studio, and I know that tomorrow is another day, and then Wednesday, God willing, we'll put to rest the mortal remains of the man lying in the casket there. And I know that we will still have some time to continue talking until we get to Wednesday. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you again, and I'm humbled to sit here with you. Very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. Now, viewers, I have been talking to the Honorable Member of Parliament for K2 South, and that is Honorable Abdullah Jifar Gomashi. He was once a former Deputy Minister of Tourism, Culture and Creative Art. Viewers, we will now be linked to a short documentary, a short playback of activities that happened today. Let's watch.
simply put, a man of the people, a man who lived according to his convictions, a man who was totally committed to the transformation and development of this country, a man who stood for social justice and who never bent or compromised on his principles to the last day. That's the man lying down.
When you look at charismatic leaders, so far as I can tell in Ghana, we've had two, President Nkrumah and President Rawlings, although they were in different eras. Nkrumah did it nationally and internationally. President Rawlings did it locally and nationally.
I'll also remember him as a female lawyer for his PNDC Law 111, Interstate Succession Law. For me, is one of the best things that happened to Ghana, because hitherto, upon the death intestate of a man, his property became family property, and if you were a child, you lived in your father's house subject to good behavior. Thanks to PNDC Law 111, now interstate succession has become relieving.
When you get close to him, he's a very humane, very humorous, very normal person, but at the same time he had a lot of depth and political insight. I was about 13 years old when he burst on the scene, and I've been following him since then as a little young. I never dreamt in my life that I would even have the opportunity of working with him, let alone becoming his friend and seeing him as a mentor. But a great man by all standards, no two ways about it. A really, really great man. This is the man who took water, electricity to many parts of this country when people thought it was not possible. And the impact those interventions have made on the lives of ordinary people up to date.
I want the young people to remember him for his probity, accountability, and his dislike for corruption.
When you look at his stature and you look at what he stood for, if we are practicing what he stood for, by now we would have gone far. Probity, accountability, and transparency is key to every government. Even though he was no more in power, he kept talking about that mantra, that Ghanaians should be able to practice that. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to stick to that.
I would say that in 40 years, it should be, said that this foundation, economic, political, social, in terms of probity, accountability, has outlived its biggest proponent, and that is Flag Lieutenant Rawlings.
Build your barriers, the taller I become.
President Rawlings embodies 4 types of leadership in one person. He was authoritarian in some respects. He was charismatic in some respects. He's laissez-faire in some respect, and he's a servant leader. He was in the Nima gutter with the people.
On the other side of J.J. Rawlings was the fact that the whole nation was enveloped at a point in the culture of silence. And the media in particular were shackled by all kinds of restrictive laws. Example, the newspaper licensing law. It was through the same J.J. Rawlings that we laid a firm, indestructible foundation for the freedom and independence of the media, as articulated in Chapter 12 of the 1992 Constitution. So if today the Ghanaian media have the courage to hold to account people in positions of authority and power, and if today in Africa Ghana is adjudged one of the best 3 performing media systems on the continent. It's all because J.J. Rawlings laid the foundation.
He was a nationalist and he wanted to work for Ghana. I also saw in him taking care of the poor, sharing his little wealth, and that is the reason why even when he stepped down as president after 19 years, I did travel with Rawlings and I could see that he was not somebody who acquired wealth because he was selfless.
I miss him so a lot because he's a father. He's a father to the nation. He's a father to Ghana. He's a father to everybody. He loves everybody. If you are in need and you go to him, he don't hesitate. He don't hesitate at all to help you to deliver your need to where you want to deliver to.
I asked him one day, sometimes you are good, sometimes you are bad. Just because of some things that I've experienced through his school and through his PNDC struggles with a lot of things that happened to my family. My uncle Alhaji Fallu was jailed by Rawlings. A whole lot has happened. But I later realized there are a lot that it was a mistake and a lot Rawlings have to do it because it's necessary. He must do it.
I say you've been president for 18 years. What have you done for Volta region? That is remarkable. I said I did some oil exploration. I did some hospitals. I did some roads. I said you could have done more. He said, but if I did, people would talk. This is the kind of person you
Welcome back. Accra International Conference Center. As the venue, and the activity here is the laying in state of the former president of the Republic of Ghana, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, the first president of the Fourth Republic. Today is almost ending, and tomorrow would be the third day, Tuesday, 26 January 2021. The activities that we would have for tomorrow still will continue with the laying in state of the former president, and those who would have to, the personalities that would come to file past the body would be President and First Lady, Vice President and Second Lady, former presidents and spouses, spouses of former presidents and vice presidents, Chief of Staff, Secretary to the President, Secretary to Cabinet, heads and former heads of constitutional bodies, Speaker, former speakers, members of Parliament, Chief of Staff, Chief Justice, former Chief Justice, Justices of the Supreme Court. Then we have a next set that will be former Chairman and former members of the Council of State, and then former Ministers of State. Then we'll have members of the Diplomatic Corps, then organized groups, and then traditional and customary rites. That will be for tomorrow, before the final burial on Wednesday. Ladies and gentlemen, viewers, this is all time would allow us until we meet again tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. It is me from Commentary Room, Gabriel Asante Busompem, saying bye-bye and stay healthy and keep safe.